fortunately, last week, actually, I was kind of more shooting indoors. So we had the big 120th anniversary Harley announcement. So they revealed their lineup for 2023 with a few new bikes. And one bike that I was lucky enough to go and see in the flesh was the Nightster Special. So it's a kind of new updated edition of the Nightster, which was released last year as a kind of liquid cooled, more, let's say, emissions friendly version of a Sportster effectively.
Yeah.
And yeah, I actually got invited to the warehouse, which is up in Gloucester, so not far away. Naturally, I went in the car, you know, I had a lot of gear with me. But it was the first bike to come into the UK, and then they unboxed it. So we got to kind of do some video footage of it being uncrated and checked over, and then parked in the warehouse for me to do a bit of a walk around. And it's quite a cool looking bike. I don't know if you've checked it out.
Just from imagery that I can find. And it does look nice. Yeah, from all of their press stuff, it looks pretty good. I think the Nightster in general looks quite swanky. That's an antwack word, isn't it? That's like, no. Take out my words, make me sound less nerdy. No, in terms of like comparisons though to the standard Nightster, how much more special does it look to your eye?
Well, I mean, what you were just saying there about the Nightster looking good, I think it really depends on your perspective. For the Harley hardcore, I think the air-cooled Sportsters and stuff like that, it's going to be very hard to let that go. And I don't think the Nightster immediately has been quite to that audience's taste, certainly from what I can see in the comments on my videos, where we do get Harley owners and stuff like that. Yeah. But I think if you just look at it from a completely neutral perspective with no context or history of liking the other bikes, and mate, like the Sportsters are great to ride. Love the engines and like the feel and sort of character of them, much like the Commando we were talking about in the last episode. But yeah, I think it looks quite cool if you just come at it from a, like I say, neutral perspective. The Special has quite a lot of upgrades, it has to be said. So you get the round TFT display from the Sportster S. So it opens up so much stuff. It's kind of crazy. Just changing the dash means that you can actually do a lot more things. So phone connectivity, of course. You can do custom riding modes as well with lots of parameters. You've got tire pressure monitoring as standard and cruise control as well. So loads and loads of things. It was quite interesting. We switched the bike on. Obviously, I couldn't take it for a ride. We'll get to test it perhaps in a few weeks or months. But looking through the settings, we went through the dash. And I've noticed this on the Sportster S, mate. It's the same operating system and layout to some extent as the Pan America. And so when you go and customize the riding modes, there are like off-road settings for the traction control and ABS and stuff. So I don't know if it's just like, it's just consistent across all those bikes that use that operating system. Or if they genuinely just thought, well, you know, we've built that tech or algorithm. Let's just leave it on there in case you do want to.
Sorry, let's go back a second. So on the Sportster and stuff, it has an off-road setting, like customizable setting.
So of course, you know, for the Pan America, there's like minimal TC and ABS intervention if you put them into an off-road setting. Especially, I think there's a dedicated off-road mode. But with the Sportster S, which came out last year, that has the same dash, and then now this Nightster Special that gets it, there's no off-road riding mode. But when you go into custom and go into traction control, ABS, some of those settings, there is an option for off-road, which is interesting. I don't know. I would not off-road one of those bikes. Let me tell you, the Sportster S has like 2 inches of rear travel on the shocks.
Well, I mean, you can do it. It'd be so impressive, though. How impressive would that be if you rocked up an adventure day?
On one of those?
Well, it'd be impressive for like all of 5 minutes until you actually set off.
Have you ever tried to stand on the pegs on a cruiser?
It takes a lot of hard work. A lot of, hard on your arms. I sort of, for some of it, I suppose maybe, you know, like you see the KTMs and stuff. They'll have like a supermoto mode and stuff, I think, because legally speaking, and it will tell you as well when you turn it off on your off-road bike, not for use on road if you turn off ABS and stuff like that. But without that, you can't then lock up the rear or do cool skids. And
that's what I was thinking. Did they leave it
fancy
so that you just got that option to be a little bit wild? But then why didn't they just call it anyway? I think honestly, personally, I'd rather have the most possible settings, and so I kind of don't mind that they left it in, but it just was a little quirk. But I don't want to anyway detract from what I'm saying. The other things you get are the passenger seat and foot pegs as standard, which don't come as standard on the other bike, and then it's got different wheels that look a bit more fancy. There's a couple of other things as well. But I think the majority is in the tech. The engine, suspension, brakes, stuff like that are pretty much the same. It's that tech. But it's about $1,000 more, I think, than the standard bike. And when you think that, if you look in the Harley accessories catalog, stuff like the seat and pegs, that'll come to 400 quid. So if you're thinking about carrying a passenger anyway, you may as well just go for the special, I suppose, because then the remaining, 600 or 800 quid gets you so much in terms of functionality. I just wonder if like that level of tech is a bit of a contradiction with the sort of cruiser style bike, especially coming from that sort of Sportster heritage and now kind of replacing it. The people want, engine braking, 5 settings or whatever. On a bike like that, I'm not really sure they do. Plus, the price is getting pretty steep for those bikes. I think it's so different in the US compared to the UK, but when they import the bikes into the UK, I think the Nightster Special is now 15,395, which is a decent amount of money.
Yeah.
And then the Nightster, when they launched it last year and I reviewed it, I thought it's a decent bike. And I thought, plenty of power, interesting, handles quite well. It's got the fuel tank under the seat. The actual tank is a dummy sort of metal airbox cover, a bit like an FTR, I suppose, from Indian.
Or a Yamaha Virago as well.
Yeah, how could I forget? And so, decent bike to ride, but it was 12,995, and I was like, oh, maybe that's pushing it a bit. And manufacturers do tend to launch bikes a little bit cheaper so that they get, good press to start. But for this year, it's gone up by 1,200 quid, so it's 14,195 for the standard bike. I think you've really got to want one. 15,395 still is, it's a decent amount of money. I know that Harley brand is worth quite a bit to some people anyway. And they do keep their value. I said this in the video about the Nightster Special. They do hold their value. If you try and find a cheap used Harley, they just don't exist.
No. Even if you go back, even decades on it from here, if you go back 10 years even, they're still holding good money.
Totally. But mate, for 15 grand, there's probably some good other bikes you could get. I don't know if that'd be top of your list. With that kind of money?
Me personally, no. I mean, I can understand, I really can see the appeal in them. I could definitely see the appeal if you live in the States and they are more affordable. I mean, it's just, unfortunately bringing it over here then makes it a premium brand and doesn't necessarily match up, like you say, with what you're actually getting in comparison to European manufacturers, which obviously can get their bikes over here a bit easier. Or even Asian ones, right? Like Japanese ones as well. Which is surprising. But in terms of like the market, they're definitely steep, aren't they? I mean, that's also true of Indian. So they they couple together nicely, don't they? Especially in terms of the bracket of price. If you're considering one, you've probably at least looked at the other. So.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. So in the UK, the Indian Scout Rogue, which is probably the most similar looking bike in their lineup and most comparable in terms of power and whatnot. I think it's about 100 horses. You get 90-ish from the Harley. That bike is 13,995, and that doesn't get anything in terms of tech. Now, I think that might be more appealing to some cruiser.
It's not going to change your day, is it? Massively. You know what I mean? You're not going to be playing with the settings. You get in a setting, you're just going to leave it there. So I wouldn't necessarily miss the extra tech. It's cool to have, but it's not a deal breaker,
is it?
No.
But that's still, I mean, they list the Indian Scout as like, they call it barely tamed power as like one of the selling points on their website. So they're trying to say like, it's 90 odd horses, I think the UK version. And the lack of electronics is a selling point for them. So it really depends on where you come at it from. It's a great bike, but it's a lot of money. And then when you compare it, I think, with those two, the other one that's a kind of obvious competitor would be the Bobber from Triumph, and that's 12,995. And again, it's quite simple. I think you do get a few features like riding modes and cruise control. You don't get the full works that you get on the Harley. And that's, 12,995. So you can save like nearly $2,500. Or you could just go for something that's not a cruiser if you just want something retro like the Speed Twin, and it'll be a great bike to ride. And that's 11,795, which is, it looks like good value. I'd say that's, still fairly spendy, but compared to those others, there's some other options out there, aren't there, mate?
Yeah, there are. I think that's one of the, I don't know whether that's even that big a problem really for Harley. I think the biggest problem would be that if it is a modern bike, and obviously they have made it up to date, and that's really good to see actually from them. And I'm excited to see where that sort of develops. But it's a contradiction really. It's a double-edged sword, because then you take away the character that buys people into the Harley brand, and you might find people wanting to buy it, a 5-year-old Harley instead that's the older models, as opposed to going for the newer models, because they're just, I don't know, kind of not grayscale's a bit harsh, but you know what I mean? They blend into the other modern manufacturers then. So they're playing in a different field almost. Tricky one. They've still got some allure to me though, I have to admit. They do. The problem is I don't ever see myself buying one. But I can't deny that they always do grab my attention.
For sure,
It's a strange one.
It was weird kind of just seeing it in the flesh and sitting on one. I was like, oh, actually, it looks quite good in the photos. And I was sort of like sitting on it for some of the pictures. And I was like, maybe I could rock this, But I think the kind of, the summary on it is, if you do want a cruiser like that, of that sort of bobber or scout or Nightster ilk, but you want something with navigation built in, and you do ride with a Cardo headset or something, and you like to play with riding modes, maybe you can justify it, because it is actually quite a lot more feature filled than the competition. But I think that's really that's the crux of it. If you want a simple bike, then you might get slightly better value with the others. Or if you just want a Harley, you want that badge, then obviously maybe it's worth paying more if you want, if that means a lot to you. But we're not posers, are we, mate?
Nope.
That was a big pause.
I'm a professional poser. My 2 days of my week are spent just standing in front of a camera.
But I have been thinking anyway, with the entire Harley lineup that they announced, there's some interesting looking bikes in there. And I wondered if any, because you're a little bit more casual on the Harleys than me, aren't you? I'm quite into it, and I reviewed quite a few, but for you, it's not really not your bag so much.
No, like I say, they've always intrigued me. They always have some kind of an allure, but I genuinely don't think I'll ever buy one myself. But I know the ones that kind of catch my attention